This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend. I've walked your snow-capped mountains that tower to the sky and cast a reflection.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is July 17th, 2025.
I'm Scott Lunenbaum.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, the cabinet has been shuffled, drug decisions are getting shuffled, and things are kind of boring federally. Status quo. But we have a couple stories to talk about. Throw us some money, patreon.com/politicos. I'm going to be away for August, but you'll fill in, find some guests, and make something happen, right?
Yeah, we'll get something lined up for that. We'll keep the listeners surprised on plans as they develop. We'll see about that last week, where like really nothing goes on right before Labor Day weekend. But yeah, should hopefully have a few interesting guests come on in the next several episodes. Next week will be our regular one,
yes,
but following that.
Might be a day early next week. Here in BC, the Premier, we know, has listened or at least been on this podcast in the past and respects our recording schedule and decided to announce today, rather than tomorrow, that there is a cabinet shuffle. And we have David Eby's third cabinet. His first one was before the election. He had a second one after. Now we're into number 3, less than a year into this. Interesting timing. Let's maybe talk about that before we get into the names. The opposition is not very strong right now. The government hasn't taken huge blows on anything for that reason. Why change now?
I would presume a lot of this is about setting up the next phase, getting, a few of the weaker performers out, moving your minister of fixing stuff and getting stuff done into a new cabinet role. You do it in the middle of July when there's not as much going on, not as many people paying attention. None of the moves here on ministries that are disasters. The health minister is staying put, which we'll talk about one story, which I don't think qualifies as should have a job loss over it, but there has been a multi-year at this point disaster of an ER system that keeps shutting down randomly that there really ought to be like greater political accountability for than there has been, but we're not seeing that in this one.
They're not going to put anyone in health until they have someone they believe can actually fix it, which I don't know if they have right now. Or maybe they still think Josie Osborne is that person. Someone David Eby didn't like in cabinet was George Chow, longtime MLA, who has been demoted from the Minister of Citizen Services, which I feel like is the ministry that goes through the highest turnover. It's like the most thankless minister.
It's a little bit like being Veterans Affairs federally. Like, you only ever have bad stories around that one.
It's customer service. You have to deal with people who are mad at the government explicitly. So George Chow is out. He is now parliamentary secretary for the Downtown East Side and Chinatown because everyone has a title in this minimal-sized majority government. Taking over citizen services is Diana Gibson. She is coming from Jobs and Economic Development, where Ravi Kalon has moved into, Ravi being one of the stars most prominent in cabinet. Someone who had been rumored to be considering a run for leadership. And I know a lot in the Urbanist and our Slack really look up to and is like, Ravi will do the things. So putting him in jobs means there's hope for economic growth and jobs, I guess.
Yeah, he's seen as one of the ministers that is a high performer and generally gets stuff done. I mean, I've had my complaints about some of the processes around the Housing Supply Act and stuff, but honestly, BC's doing better than most of the other provinces on this, and a large amount of that is from him on this. So, yeah, leaving housing with a good record. I'm sure some of the NIMBYer types out there are going to be tempted to try and claim this as a victory for them, because they all hated the you have to actually build houses in the big cities rules that provincial government put in place. But considering who is coming into the role after him, that doesn't really fly. And if anything, it is a doubling down on it, as they put in someone with at least as strong a housing record, former city councillor and now former Minister of Indigenous Relations, Christine Boyle, is new housing minister. She has a very good record when it comes to housing votes municipally. So likely going to continue a strong housing growth oriented housing ministry.
Yeah, I can't see her heavily deviating from the path that David Eby, Ravi Kahlon have set for that ministry. And if anything, I think she brings potentially slightly more interest in non-market housing, not at the expense of all housing, but, how can the government get more houses built, whether by forcing those zoning changes through, or by just getting more affordable subsidized housing directly built. Boyle will be a great person for that job. Yeah,
the one thing I'm a little curious on how this is going to go is at the phase we are now, like, the big policies have been put in place. The Housing Supply Act got passed in 2023. We've done a couple rounds of housing needs assessments, letters from the minister saying you guys need to clean up your act, or we're basically going to use the powers we've given ourselves to appoint people to do this for you and all that. The cities have also dragged their feet in some cases. Vancouver passed a bunch of stuff that had headline compliance, but was not as bold as it should have been under. And now you're going to actually have to do the grinding attritional warfare against the municipalities one by one to actually make sure this stuff gets done and actually gets implemented, and the cities can't do an end run around the province on this. And I'm going to be curious if that's going to be a good fit for Boyle. That doesn't necessarily seem to naturally align with her temperament, but we'll see.
I don't think she's a political coward in any sense, no. But I know you're not saying that, right? It's just, is she going to be the tough cop, essentially, that she needs to be, that we need the housing minister to be, to bring municipalities into compliance? Or is she more of a negotiator? And the time for negotiation is over.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't doubt the political courage here. I mean, I've seen that on the municipal level with housing, but yeah, it's the issue going to be the bad cop and stern provincial voice on this that's really needed. Or
is she talented enough to negotiate them all in? Maybe she could negotiate it, but I'm not optimistic about that. She's tough, right? It's pointed out by Justin McElroy that it's kind of funny that she is also taking over municipal affairs, and she will be like the face of the provincial government for dealing with Ken Sim, who lodged code of conduct complaints against her when they were both on city council together. Hatchets will be buried, I suspect.
Potentially?
Maybe. If Ken Sim wants some money.
What were those complaints about? I can't recall off the top of my head.
She had tweeted things about Trevor Ford when he was appointed chief of staff to the mayor. She called him like a, reactionary Albertan conservative or something, maybe slightly worse on Twitter. And so he filed a complaint about that. And so she retracted it and said, sorry.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff is this weird thing where we kind of pretend that municipal politics isn't entirely politics. Yeah, I don't know. Some of the forms around that stuff get weird, and trying to force an apolitical approach to something that is actually very political.
Yeah. Boyle was seen as having done pretty well in Indigenous relations and reconciliation. There hadn't been many upsets between First Nations and the province aside from Bill 15, largely. And so taking over that role will be big shoes to fill, but Spencer Chandra Herbert is moving into that. He is coming from tourism, arts, culture, and sport. Chandra Herbert's also been around the NDP for a little while now. He's previously been deputy speaker, I believe, and now he gets a pretty prominent cabinet role. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs in that, because that file, particularly if the government is moving on some big infrastructure projects, or the federal government is, could get spicy, to put it mildly. And it's an important one for this government, I suspect. So I'll keep my eye on him. Taking over tourism, arts, culture, and sport is Anne Kang. She is coming from post-secondary education and future skills. Anne Kang's a Burnaby MLA who's been there for 2 or 3 terms now. And taking over post-secondary and education is Jessie Sunner, Surrey MLA, newly elected this past year, I believe. And her first entry into cabinet from whatever Parlsec job she had before. I forget. I didn't write it down. And that's the card shuffling. We also get a demotion of Gary Begg from Parliament. He was previously the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. He is now Parliamentary Secretary for Surrey Infrastructure.
Very niche.
It's important infrastructure. It is a growing and large city. But we don't have a Vancouver infrastructure Parliamentary Secretary, I notice.
Or South Island one.
Yeah. And so Nina Krieger is taking over that ministry. She's a Victoria Capital Region MLA, former director of the Holocaust Education Center, but pretty widely respected. And it's a prominent role, so we'll see how she does in that. And finally, Rick Glumack has a change of title from Minister of State for Trade to Minister of State for AI and New Technologies.
Cool. So he gets to hang out with Evan Sullivan then.
Great.
And do vaguely AI stuff. I don't know. It's not clear what these ministries are doing.
No. Well, at least it's a Minister of State, which is less than a full minister, but more than a parliamentary secretary. It's a vague middle ground he lives in. A couple MLAs also got new parliamentary secretary roles besides what I mentioned. Amna Shah, parliamentary secretary for anti-racism initiatives, mental health and addictions, and Paul Choi gets the parliamentary secretary for trade. So trade has been demoted from a minister of state to a parliamentary secretary.
Which seems interesting given everything going on right now. I expect a lot of it is just going to be Ravi's going to be taking the lion's share of the oxygen on the file, so having a different minister is just going to complicate things. But yeah, just looking in isolation, it's an odd choice.
So there we have it. They'll go back into the fall, and I guess this gives them some, time-wise, enough time for the rest of the summer to get ready, get their feet into the file, get into the files, plan for,
on this one?
I don't know. I'm tired, Scott. I'm hot and tired. They'll be ready to introduce bills in the fall, debate the issues, and hopefully, I say NDP hasn't really stumbled in the first term, but they also haven't posted a lot of strong wins, right? And I think that's what maybe this can help inspire, is by bringing some new faces around. They can take, a C+ performance, B- that is saved by a broken opposition that can't decide if they even want the leader, and try and actually do something.
Although for the opposition, their own internal leadership debates, they do seem to have done a better job than the previous opposition parties of actually landing blows on the government, whether it's over funding of certain medicines, the ferry issue we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, a little earlier batch, some of the stuff around drugs and whatnot. They've they've actually at least seemed to learn how to do the opposition role, which the PC Liberals never really got comfortable with and figured out how to do post 2017. So they despite the is John Rustad going to stick around questions, they are dealing with a more effective opposition than they've had before.
Very low bar, but yes, I will grant you that. Well, looking at what this government has done in the last week, one of the last, I guess, moves of Ravi in housing was to give Metrovan a break, or at least the developers. Metrovan had, I think we talked about, jacked development cost charges significantly to pay for a lot of infrastructure debts that are piling up in the region. And that had been condemned pretty widely by all levels of government as making housing really hard to build. And so the province has stepped in with a $250 million in cash, along with the federal government, to help those developers whose project is kind of in limbo and on the edge of not happening because of this increased fee.
Yeah, because they were going to be tripling the fees in some cases, and this is already after like a couple decades of the fees increasing well above the rate of inflation. It actually added up, like Metro Vancouver, the municipalities, all that. It's a shockingly high amount of the cost of a new home is just government fees on all this. In theory, also the federal government's housing stuff is supposed to come with fee caps, and they've been a little mediocre when it comes to really sticking to that and holding the cities accountable. But yeah, this is like short-term good, but the real thing that's going to have to happen is the model where new housing is the primary cash cow that funds cities, rather than, regular taxes that people pay for the services and infrastructure they use, needs to be changed. And you need to go back to the older, you just gotta pay for stuff out of your tax-based model. And yeah, this is good as a stopgap, but like really the feds and the particularly the province really ought to be doing more to push cities in that direction.
Maybe we should have a regional sales tax like we talked about, and then put a referendum on, but that was just for transit. Let's not put taxes to referendums. Those don't usually go well, unless you don't want the tax, I guess.
Yeah, the last one we want's like a BC version of Prop 13, the ridiculous California thing that is incredibly distortionary on their property tax system.
The next thing the provincial government has done, we're doing this in no particular order other than what I felt like on vibes.
It's a grab bag of a news week because literally there was one big story, and that was the one we talked about at the top of the show.
But stick with us. There's lots to come. The province has published an order in council to define what projects qualify under Bill 14, the Advancing Green Energy. They had announced when that was in the legislature that there were a specific set of projects that the province would be streamlining to move ahead. And now they have said, you know what? All future wind and solar projects get the fast assessment. Let's get them built.
Good.
Yeah, seems.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know why they needed to wait till now to start outlining the sorts of things they were going to be doing it. Amusingly, though, in the story here, the Greens are not happy with this, which just feels like peach green to have someone come in and try and make it easier to build renewable energy, and having the Greens tut about not giving local communities enough veto over it.
The Conservatives are saying the exact same thing, too.
Yeah, I suppose, you could point out some parts where it's not exactly the most small government, low regulation approach for the Conservatives on that, but it feels really discordant for the Greens, at least in theory. I mean, if you know what the party's actually like, it's not as big a surprise, but they are not the environmentalists they brand themselves as.
Like, this bill does put a lot of the approvals through the BC Energy Regulator, and I know the Greens have had criticisms of that body in the past, which, I haven't refreshed enough on to get into here, but overall, I look around the world at countries building green energy, and I'm like, we need to keep up. And if this is helping us get there, that's positive. On the, helping promote the green energy, one of the kind of ridiculous policies we've had for a while in BC was to allow EV drivers to use high occupancy vehicle lanes. Not all of them, just like certain provincially designated ones, which is most of them. It's just not like the Barnett Highway HOV lane, which is, I would guess, just run by Burnaby. But this policy has always been kind of an incentive to get more people into EVs and reduce the pollution on our highways. You always had to apply for a sticker. It was pretty easy to get. You just gave your license plate, what kind of car you have, which they have registered to your plate, and said, yep, that's one of the approved EVs, and they mail you a sticker pretty quick. Turns out that was getting backlogged. There was a 7 to 8 week wait for the sticker. And so they said, you know what? We are abolishing the sticker requirement. So all EVs can just use it now. Weirdly, they have now said hydrogen vehicles are not allowed to use HOV lanes unless there's multiple people in it.
Okay, that's like 2 vehicles in the province.
Yeah.
Because nobody uses hydrogen to drive around anymore. It barely even there's like some early test prototype adoption. I think Whistler had some buses for a little while, but like hydrogen's a dead technology at this point.
Yeah, it always seemed like a weird side path, but maybe some trucks it could make sense, but or buses where you could have a central
channels were very hard to compete with just all the wires that existed already on that. The sticker thing seems, as EV adoption becomes more and more common and reaches higher levels, at some point this is going to become a challenge. Like, the backlog already hints at that a bit, but when 50%, 70% of the vehicles on the road are EVs, does it even make sense to have the HOV designation for them? Because you're not getting any benefit at this point. You're trying to defeat the purposes of the HOV lane because, EVs are better for emissions, but they don't change the fundamental geometry that is at the core of the transportation system.
Yeah, like, we're sitting around 20 to 30% EV sales right now. It has dropped in the last couple months since provincial and federal subsidies just ran out. I just upgraded, or my family just upgraded our EV to a bigger one because bigger family, and we're suburban now, so we are the problem driving a nice EV SUV. And we can't get the sticker because they don't have the stickers anymore. It would have taken 8 weeks. But this change in policy doesn't actually apply to August 15th. So we can only use the EV lane for the next month if there is more than one person in the vehicle. And then we can use it regardless. But yeah, it is a policy that has a clear, eventually someone needs to abolish it. And
it's a bit like using...
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a bit like using gas taxes as a transportation funding source. It has a very clear best before date. My
favorite part of this story is that it's estimated to save the provincial government $70,000 a year, which means to me that they have fired like almost one person.
That's really less than a full-time equivalent.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because you have
benefits.
When you factor in benefits and the postage that they were, because you didn't pay to get these stickers. So the government had postage and printing costs too. So it was like a half-time job that no longer exists. Which, like, probably didn't need to exist because we don't need the stickers. The enforcement question also comes up now because not all EVs are Teslas or look futuristic. Mine kind of does, but like now, your roadside cop needs to be trying to figure out, is there more than one person in there, or is it an electric vehicle that I just don't know? But that assumes they're enforcing HOV lanes anyway, which
at the where is it? Where Grandview Highway meets up with the Highway 1. I have fairly frequently seen cops hanging out at the HOV on-ramps and off-ramps there.
Oh.
So
right.
That I know for a fact that spot in particular is a very common HOV enforcement area.
Fair enough.
Well, a couple of years back, the province did away with the license plate decals. They moved to an entirely digital system where you don't need to every year get a new sticker to put on to show you have current registration. And I believe the enforcement on that was basically, we're just going to link our databases together so people out enforcing it can just check against the license plate to see if it's current registration. The make and model is available too. Be pretty
That's
easy
true.
to have the EV status in the database on that as well, particularly because they were already using that to decide the sticker.
Yeah. Fair enough. So, no more stickers.
They should probably cancel the program altogether in like a year or two.
They should. The only time I'm using those lanes anyway is when 3 of us are in the car driving to an appointment or something anyway. But that's just because we don't commute for the most part. The final provincial story we'll touch on has been the simmering one for several weeks that we haven't touched on yet. It's the tragic story of Charlie Pollock, the young child on Vancouver Island, I believe, who has a disease that she's the only one with this disease in all of British Columbia. And she was on a special treatment for this that was keeping her quality of life static. There was a slow decline. And at some point, the diagnosis came through that it had passed a certain qualifying cognitive, checkpoint, at which point the provincial funding for her medicines turned off. And when that turns off and she doesn't get her medicine, irreparable brain decline happens pretty quick. And I think the worst part of the story is that the notice came like 2 days before they were renewing a prescription. So it was just a kick in the pants. I think that is the most egregious part of this. Like, not to have, okay, we're cutting you off, but in a month or two.
I mean, that would have been less of a kick in the face, but I mean, there's no good way to deliver the message that your child's critical medical treatments are being cut off.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to just sit there and watch her die, which I don't know enough about this disease, but it seemed like was inevitable at some point. It's like just a very tragic story. But
the media coverage has described it as terminal. So from neither of us are doctors, but inferring from that. Yeah.
So her mother obviously was devastated, but also a tireless advocate, clearly, for her child, and worked with different academics and has fought this the entire time. Finally brought through, and the province maintained that this was a medical decision. It was also pointed out this medicine was costing the province, was it $1 million a year?
I believe it was $1 million a year. And that's the thing we've kind of been referencing but haven't directly touched is, there's no medical system that is free from scarcity or and rationing. Like, everyone has it. I mean, the U.S. one's a little more, you ration by ability to pay, or how good your medical insurance's ability to pay is. In Canada, it tends to be, on a lot of cases, rationed by how long you're willing to spend sitting in an ER room waiting to be seen, and other wait lists. And in cases for rare diseases like this, it's there is some commission, group of bureaucrats somewhere that makes the decision that this is just doesn't pass the cost benefit anymore, so the public system is not going to cover it, and it's a little
it feels callous, right?
Yeah, callous. That's the word I was looking for. Callous on that, but it's kind of the way it goes with a lot of government decisions. There is a point at which it no longer makes sense. This is $1 million a year. I mean, if it was $1 billion, like, it would not make sense to spend 1/5 of the government's healthcare funding, or 10% of the government's healthcare funding on something like this.
So it was a tough story, and the accusation flies. Is this more a pure medical scientific evidence-based decision, or is this a rationing decision? And it's never 100% clear, honestly.
Yeah, and particularly when you do have a publicly funded system, there is always going to be the incentive to contest adverse decisions in the realm of public advocacy and politics.
Yeah, and private HMOs in the States will definitely still make those financial decisions for basically the same reasons. But if you can pay, you can get any snake oil or legit treatment you want in the US often. So this had been I can't imagine an easy file for the health minister to uphold, as she's been peppered with questions over the weeks of like, why are you letting this kid die? Why are you? And she goes, it's not my decision, it's medical. And finally, the mother came with a binder of arguments and expertise saying, here are people who disagree with the decisions and the evidence being used by the province. Please at least consider it. The premier, I think, got that this morning, said it was pretty substantial. And just this evening, the committee has reconsidered, and while there is uncertainty about the evidence, they will continue the treatment, because I think that's the most fair option. If it seems like there is some possible benefit for it, like it's irreparable damage to cut her off, and I think they did cut her off for a month or two. At least give her a couple more treatments while we sort out what's been provided. It's a really tough policy issue.
Yeah. It absolutely is. I do wonder how much of the change of decision was the government didn't want to go another 3 weeks of being harangued on the issue. But yeah, it's one of those things where, like, the intuitions that everyone has and the hard math of how to actually make a publicly funded system with scarce resources work can often butt up, and it just puts the government in a really tough spot.
And I mean, in the end, this is such a weird, rare case, right? Like, there's lots of people who get cut off, unfortunately, for them in general. But this one is like, if we give it to her, that looks like a win for compassion. And like, in the grand scheme, $1 million a year is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money to the province. Like, I know they're trying to be tight with their belts, but maybe we try to help this child live as a society, and it looks a little bit better, and we all feel a little bit better about ourselves, even if structurally everything is the exact same. Like, maybe we cheat this time and it helps for another year or two. It's really rough. Like, even my child's own treatment decisions have, like, her surgeries have go through consultations between, like, her cardiologist, her surgeon, cardiothoracic surgeon, as well as ones who are connected across Western Canada. It's not even just necessarily always a provincial. Like, I assume in this case, the doctor for this young girl was consulting with experts across the country. Like, these panels are rarely tied to one province, even though the medical system is delivered that way. It's just really tough. And yeah, the decision was changed. The government gets to cheer, the mother gets to cheer, and the can has been kicked down the road a little bit. No easy answer.
Really is not on this one.
don't have a good segue because I don't think any is fair to Charlie Pollock and her family. So let's just jump to federal politics and talk about the Conservative Party of Canada. The federal Conservatives have announced when Poilievre's leadership review will be happening. That's been known for a couple months now, I think. But conveniently, the Doug Ford's Ontario Progressive Conservatives decided, you know what, that's a great weekend. That sounds like the perfect time for us to hold our convention because fuck you, Pierre Poilievre. They still hate each other.
Is it? Like, I'm actually trying to game.
No, it's awful. It's funny though.
It's funny, but I'm trying to game out who benefits and not from this. Because you could definitely see the Ontario PC crowd maybe being not the biggest Pierre Poilievre fans, so keeping a bunch of them in Ontario could maybe help him, but at the same time, it's smaller crowd, skews the distribution. It looks bad to have competing conservative conference conventions at the same time. On the other hand, it might be what does Doug Ford get out of this? I mean, his position's pretty secure. He just won an even bigger victory last time. There doesn't seem to be any internal rumblings within the PC world to unseat him. Yeah, at the same time, I'm sure keeping the diehard Poilievre fans away from that convention might make it go smoother. It just seems like one of those things where the more you try and figure out who's trying to play for what here, just the more confusing it is.
Yep. Maybe it might just be as simple as spite. That might just be all that's happening here. Also in the Conservative world, it's announced that Poilievre's advisor, Jenny Byrne, one of the key architects of their electoral strategy, and one of the people who got the most shit for the performance of the Conservatives. But even during the campaign, there were a lot of stories of candidates saying she was cruel and vicious and just refused to go off course, even when it was clear they really needed to change course.
Definitely has a take no prisoners attitude, and one that often doesn't land well with others. I mean, the thing that always sticks out to me when it comes to Jenny Byrne, or at least recently, Aaron O'Toole, after he became a private citizen, tweeted out something after, I forget even which Liberal it was, but some Liberal had stepped down and said they were leaving politics, and he did the most pro forma, thank you for your, service to the country kind of thing. Literally the most pro forma political statement that gets said whenever someone steps down, for which Byrne just came in guns blazing. It's this is why he's no longer the leader of the Conservatives, which is not true. That observing the pro forma niceties of politics is not why Aaron O'Toole is no longer leader. But it's that attitude that has been seen in public that, but definitely is reported on, has come across in the internal party fights as well, or the internal party management during the election, that I could definitely see a lot of feathers getting ruffled. A lot of people would kind of like someone else to be in that job.
Despite all that, she's sticking around, and at least for now. I mean, sometimes stories that say so-and-so is staying on despite speculation turn out to be false a week later, or at least only last a week. So at least for now, Jenny Byrne's not going anywhere. And I think the best...
They should shake things up, though.
Yes, but they're shaking them up in one direction, at least, as a story this past week had Poilievre at a press conference saying, not only do we need to change course on immigration, we need, quote, very hard caps on immigration. Quote, we need more people leaving than coming, as Poilievre has gone from just getting immigration under control to just let's do net negative migration in a country that has only ever economically grown through immigration.
Or it's definitely been a big part, but yeah,
It definitely has been helpful.
Yeah, definitely been helpful, particularly now where the natural population growth is not enough to sustain the country, which is like a longer term problem and one that should definitely be worked on. But yeah, I don't know. This is a mess. It's annoying. Did we talk about the Century Initiative comments during the election and stuff?
Not really. They were definitely like a part. So remind people what the Century Initiative is first, and what the Conservatives' comments were.
Yeah, they're basically a organization that wants to see Canada grow its population, have 100 million people by the end of the century. I think we even talked to their it was executive director several years back. It'll be in the podcast archives, I'm sure. But yeah, like the basic, there was a book by Maximum Canada basically making the same argument for 100 million people. It's a pro-population growth organization. Makes a lot of sense. Canada definitely is underpopulated for a country its size, and there's a lot of things that correlate with population size, political, economic, military, all of that change grows with population. And with respect to what's going on now, we would be in a much better position if the relative size of the two countries was, say, 3-1, which is what 100 million Canadians would be to the Americans, slightly over 300 million, than the roughly 10-1 it is now.
Yeah, and all of this was largely a discussion like in academia or in the like think tanky area with
like the Toronto the like elite Toronto discourse in a lot of cases.
And so naturally there were some like prominent liberals sympathetic to this. And like the federal government under Trudeau was never like, we're doing Century Initiative, but it was like, there's a lot of alignment on that. Yeah, they're more open to it than anyone else was at the time. And so naturally it also became a little bit of a conspiracy theory. And during the election, Poilievre alluded to that multiple times, citing
to a weird extent.
Yeah.
So if I was to give the Steelman case for a lot of this stuff, the immigration system kind of got away from the Trudeau government during the last half of its time. Rates of temporary visas, whether it's temporary foreign workers or student visas and all that stuff, exploded because none of the work by the federal government or the other levels of government was done to ensure that hospitals, transportation, housing, all infrastructure, all of that stuff grew proportionately. There were some real stresses on a lot of the core societal functions that were at least in part population growth related, and you saw the outcome of that politically in the fact that I think it was 2021, 2022 for the first time in my entire lifetime, immigration started polling neutrally to negative on there. And there was definitely some screw up, some not minding things that they didn't get away from the government. Kind of actually a pretty common Trudeau era problem of, we're doing this good thing, and the good thing we're doing, that's enough. We don't actually need to make sure all the details are done. We don't need to have stuff in place to think about the downsides and mitigate them.
Well, and I think it's important to mention that the Trudeau big increases in immigration, like you mentioned, they were temporary migration largely. It was not what Century Initiative generally calls for, which is an increase in permanent migration to build this country. What Trudeau's the increase was how do we exploit more people to keep the economy running?
I mean, PR numbers and stuff. Yeah, PR numbers and stuff also climbed up on that. They did change some of the stuff around decreasing the relative proportion on economic immigrants in favor of more family reunification, that sort of stuff. This is one of those things that kind of shifts a bit back and forth depending on which party's in power at the time. But yeah, so there were some real things that happened related to immigration that changed the political and policy reality around it, is kind of what I was in a somewhat long way getting to on this. And that there is absolutely a place for, we need to rethink this. We need to kind of go back to the basics of, the point system, and all of that. This feels different than that, and yeah,
it mirrors a lot of the right-wing rhetoric in Europe.
A little
in some
bit.
ways. I'm not saying it's the exact same. Theirs often goes far more racist. His is just broadly too many immigrants. But that is
and he
familiar.
Like a month or so ago, did an interview with the Hub, and he was pressed a little bit on that, and actually had in a longer form setting, had a kind of reasonable answer about basically focusing on net numbers for the time being and stuff. But that really that's just not coming through here.
And a politician,
the long form reasonable stuff, you can occasionally see a sliver of that, and then it just goes back to the 3-word slogan stuff, and
it comes down to, do you trust what the politician says when someone presses him, and he can weasel towards where it's a little more acceptable to the questioner, versus
it's the Hub. He wasn't going to lose the audience on that, regardless of what he answered. But
this is this wasn't even questions as far as I can tell. He just straight up wanted to do a press conference on wanting fewer immigrants.
It just seems politically weird. It's the
he came out of the last election and decided, what my problem was I wasn't right-wing enough. Maybe it's a play for his job, actually.
Yeah, because you can, there's absolutely a space for some conversations around immigration and how Canada approaches it that are actually pretty reasonable and honestly a little overdue. In a lot of cases, just kind of re-rationalizing the system to, 2015, 2014 was working great, not having any problems, very immigrant friendly at the same time. Just going back to that is a very solid position for any conservative to take. This, it feels dumb politically because you are just inviting comparisons to the US at a time where that's not going to work all that well politically, and on that very topic, there is a pretty solid spot you can be that is a contrast to the government while also addressing the core policy concerns that motivated this.
So we'll see how he goes over the next few months. Somewhere Poilievre is a little bit stronger is on slamming ethics allegations around the Prime Minister. The Ethics Commissioner released the details of Mark Carney's investments this past week, which obviously invited a lot of scrutiny. Turns out Mark Carney is a very wealthy man, has a lot of money, and most of it is tied up in various companies that stand to benefit from government contracts at different times. All of those are now in blind trusts, and we have been assured that those have been in blind trusts pretty much since the leadership campaign, roughly. That said, there's still a lot of criticism out there from Pierre Poilievre, even people on the left. I've seen a lot of people just go after Carney for just how many different investments he has had. Now, the clear thing about a blind trust is he doesn't even know what investments he has anymore because his trustee can buy or sell anything he wants with some fiduciary duties to
And
make
that's
Mark
kind of
Carney money.
where the challenge is, because, you start selling all that stuff and suddenly you're going to be incurring a lot of taxable events and everything. So like
Well, Mark Carney's not allowed to sell it while it's in a blind trust. The trustee would have to do it.
Yeah, but
and he
if
can't
the trustee
direct.
has a fiduciary duty, part of that is don't hand the person you're the fiduciary for a giant tax bill
Yeah.
on it. So like there is going to be, just if everyone's playing ball on this one the way they should be, you kind of can get a sense that it's probably not going to deviate all that much, particularly over the course of 6 months from what went into it, which is a challenge. But like, so can't they have like an easy way around that?
Don't let rich people become prime minister. I don't know. That's clearly not democratic either. Yeah, it's not good for Mark Carney. I don't like, these are the stories we had during the election campaign that didn't really land, but they thought, we kind of felt they might go somewhere, but then they didn't. And I think it might be that same situation now. Like, Poilievre is like, he lied during the campaign because he said he didn't have these investments. And it's like unclear exactly what the lie Poilievre is trying to claim is in there. Yeah, it's a little messy. I don't think he can sell his assets. It's kind of just the nature of our system that we have people in power tend to have wealth as well. Something to be said about that. But finally, speaking of people in power, the federal housing minister, you might think has power, but it turns out the real power is held by single-family homeowners in suburban Toronto who don't want sixplexes in their neighborhood, Scott.
Yeah, so
yeah.
a couple weeks ago, Toronto voted to like significantly curtail a proposal to basically allow sixplexes everywhere, which, I think we can all criticize on that one. But where this intersects with federal politics is, over the last little while, the federal housing ministers that have preceded Greg Robertson have been going around signing deals with all these cities saying, yeah, we'll give you a bunch of money if you make these specific policy changes. And that was one of the policy changes that they agreed on. Toronto didn't really do it. And now there's a question of whether or not the federal government is going to be using the giant page of money that it has as a stick to actually ensure this happens, or whether they're basically going to, express concern, but then make the payment anyway and not really hold cities accountable for this.
And the answer to that question is we still don't know. Last week, Gregor Robertson called the Toronto's breach of the deal concerning. This week, he has called it disappointing. And when asked, what are they going to do about it? He said, I won't share the details. We have some time before a decision has to be made regarding funding. That's the rest of the year to find solutions on this, but it's certainly disappointing. I think he's kind of just hoping Toronto reverses course or does something that they can pass as a win. But yeah, there's no like hammer coming down at this point.
No, and like that's kind of the problem is, you've got a little bit of a lead time before you have to do that, but if you want to force their hand on this one, it would sure be good to actually be clear that this is a bright line for the feds, and they're not really going to find it acceptable if it's just we'll see how this goes, we're open to all kinds of options, rather than we expect the city to abide by what they agreed to, and if they don't, well, we're going to we're going to consider this a breach and not actually pay them it because the agreement's no longer in effect.
I think I was going to say, I think people had hopes for Gregor Robertson as housing minister, but maybe this maybe this is exactly what we should have expected. Yeah. Well, here we go. We need housing. They have decided to continue the negotiations, and yeah, TBD if Toronto goes hard or kind of flounders around. At least some of Toronto is getting upzoned to sixplexes, though. We'll grant that.
Yeah, like the downtown parts in like one ward in Scarborough, which is better than nothing, but like, come on, just hold Toronto's feet to the fire on this one, because you can bet if Toronto gets away with it, every other place is going to be looking at that.
And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.